Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am honored to be joined by Matt Kutz. Matt, tell us who you are and what you do.
So thanks, Xander. Really appreciate being on your show today. I'm a professor. My day job is a university professor. I'm probably here because one of the best things that I know to get the word out is to write books. So I write books. I'm an author, speaker, researcher as well. So I've been able to kind of span that gap. A lot of my research has worked into that space. And I recently wrote a book that's coming out in December. So it's not out yet, but it's coming out, called Becoming Epic.
And, oh my.
So I'm really excited about that. And of course, that comes with a story, you know, and what happened to me to get to that place to write that. But my day job is a college professor. I teach in a doctoral program at Florida International University in Miami. I work and live I live in Ohio, work in Miami. So I'm a telecommuter and have a lot of fun with that. And I get to do quite a bit of traveling and things like that.
That is great. And what are you professoring?
I am professor. Yeah, great question. So that's a loaded question. So I am a professor in the Doctor of Athletic Training program. So I teach in a doctoral program for healthcare clinicians, athletic training in particular, which for most of your listeners is probably more familiar to say sports medicine. So sports medicine is the space. And then within my particular doctoral program, because it's an advanced practice doctorate, we specialize in particular focus areas. In our particular DAT, we focus in leadership development. We focus in professionalization skills, entrepreneurship, global leadership. So my PhD is in global leadership. I serve as the vice president for the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy. I'm an editor of 2 different journals, you know, stuff like that. So I have the very traditional academic, tenured professor, journal editor, scholar stuff. But the real fun stuff that I get to do and the thing that brings me a lot of joy is the writing and the speaking in that space, more of a leadership development space. Mindset preparation is what I like to call it. So that's I do a little bit of a lot of things.
Definitely. Well, it's too bad you're not busy there, Matt.
Yeah, need one more thing to do. That's for sure.
Exactly. And of course, you know that I absolutely have to ask about the fact that you also have Epic in the title of your book. I obviously have Epic Begins with One Step Forward, my book, my podcast, my TV show, all things epic. Let's talk a little about your epic journey.
Yeah. So again, I've been in this professor gig for almost 30 years now. And I've always been incredibly fascinated with leadership development, leadership thinking. And several years ago, in fact, I believe it was 2013, I had my first foray into writing something other than academic books. Yeah, I've written textbooks and, like I said, journal articles and all those things. And I always joke that, you know, textbooks are a great place that people hide information because nobody reads textbooks. You know, who wants to read a textbook? And that frustrated me a little bit. So I tried the professional trade book route, and I wrote a book, a spinoff from my dissertation years ago called Contextual Intelligence, how 3D thinking can help you navigate complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. And that turned out to be, you know, a huge hit for me. It won Leadership Book of the Year a few years back for innovation and cutting edge perspective. It launched me into this public speaking, corporate training space that I really didn't know existed as an athletic trainer who was primarily working with injured athletes and taping ankles and rehabilitating, you know, orthopedic injuries and all that kind of stuff. I just had known from working with athletes for as long as I had that there's a certain mindset to how they approach things, especially the successful ones. And so I began to think about that, wrote that book, and that kind of launched me into the space that I'm in, like I talked about, corporate training, et cetera. And that was a ton of fun. I've been super blessed with most of my clients, Fortune 500 clients. I mean, I joke about it with my colleagues. And it's like, it's a 3-beer story because it's one of those pinch me kind of a things for an academic. I literally wrote an academic paper one time. Somebody found it, read it, liked it, turned it into a book for me, helped me do all blah, blah, blah. And it launched me into this space. And so I find myself in this space enjoying life. And then November of 2023, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And and it was, supposed to be the easy kind, if there's such a thing as the easy kind of cancer. It kind of seems ridiculous to me. But that's what I was told. It's the easy kind, it's not going to be a problem. So we move forward with the treatments and biopsies and all the different things. And long story short is it wasn't the easy kind. Turned out to be a Gleason 8, which is how they score prostate cancer, a little bit different than stage 4, but it would be equivalent to stage 4 in that it had metastasized. So it was already metastasized. It worked its way out of my prostate. There was some in my pelvis, some in my lymph nodes in my groin area. And so all of a sudden, this easy cancer is now going to kill me if I don't do something about it quickly.
Yeah.
And so we did. We aggressively moved into treatment and therapy and all the stuff. And we did all the things, that we needed to do. One of the things is 40 days of radiation, and particularly intense radiation. So because of the radiation schedule, I had to cancel 3 of my speaking gigs that I had during those 40 days. And which is hard for me, not because it wasn't even about the money at all. I actually love it. I love doing it. Like, I get a lot of emotion and energy from that. And it's such fun for me. And so I didn't want to waste my time. So I made just a personal vow to myself that during these 40 days that I just had to sit here in the house and wait for radiation, that I would write 1,000 words every day for 40 days. It's just part of, I intended it to be kind of a catharsis journal, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And what ended up happening from that is about a year or two before that, I started developing a module that I use in my doctoral class on what I call the Epic Leadership Loop. The Epic Leadership Loop is what I call 4 leadership maxims. Those 4 leadership maxims are excellence, perception, inspiration, and compassion. And those are the 4 things you need to have. And it was an accident, really. I looked at it at EPIC. It spells epic. And so that's what I call the Epic Leadership Loop. And those are the 4 things that I believe every leader worth their salt needs to invest time and energy into: being excellent, learning to be perceptive, learning how to cultivate and disseminate inspiration, and then learning how to practice compassion, both personally and to others. And so anyway, so I had that in the backdrop and in the back of my mind. And as I was going through this 40 days of writing, it was day 3 of the writing that I remembered that. So I just started putting that in the journal. Yes, now it's really time for me to be, practice what I preach. I've got to be epic. And something, I'm not kidding you, it may sound spooky and wacky, but something literally just snapped in my brain in a good way, just kind of in my brain. And the next 37 days, I just unpacked everything that I thought I knew or that was in me for the last 20 plus years of research and reading and writing on leadership development, leadership thinking, all of those things. And by the end of it, I had this book, obviously a very first rough draft, or what Brene Brown calls the SFD, the shitty first draft.
Yeah.
And it was that, but we turned it into a book, and I pitched it to some of my publisher friends, et cetera. And so it's coming out here and before the end of the year, probably late November, early December.
Well, congratulations on that. Having written 3 books myself, I know that it is an epic journey. And, it oftentimes the Hard part isn't actually writing it. It's getting through all the proofreading, all the edits, all the whatever. I'm guessing that right about now, Matt, you may be coming to the point where you're like, I love my book, but I don't want to reread my book again for the 18th
I don't
time.
want to even talk about it anymore. It's so funny. It hadn't even come out yet. And people are asking, it's like, I'm done. I'm on to something else. I'm thinking about something else.
No,
My publishers and marketers hate it, but I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do this.
I totally get it. I joke all the time on my podcast that by the time my books came out, I honestly didn't want to look at my book for about a month or two because I had just spent 6 or 8 weeks. I'd reread my own book like 7 times.
Right.
I was like, oh, I know what's coming up. All right. Yeah.
Wish I would have said this differently. That's what I do. I read it. I'm like, oh, I could have said that so much better.
I guess the difference is I'm a talker, not a typer. So I'm like, yeah, I don't need to, unless it's like really egregious. I'm like, no, that's not reading the way I want it to. But honestly, you're like, all right, I've read this sentence 7 times now, and okay, it's good enough. I don't know how to
get to that place too. It's like, okay, I'm not changing it. It says what it says, but you're right. And actually, I'm excited and not excited, if I can use that, is because next week I start the recordings for the audio.
Oh gosh, I've done that too, and
so I'm gonna have to read through it, again. It's like, oh my goodness. But and then anyway, yeah, no, it's a thrill. This is the stuff authors, you don't hear in the author workshop, kind of thing, because you're right. Getting the ideas out there on the initial paper, that's the fun, easy part. But taking it from that to a readable book and all that happens in between that is definitely an epic process, like you said.
Absolutely. And for me, you shared what epic meant to you. I'll tell you what epic means to me in my context is that every pilgrimage includes commitment, because I believe that no matter what your epic journey that you're on, whether it's writing a book, overcoming what I term for what your prostate cancer, the epic unexpected, these huge things that change our life, but obviously you had no idea it was coming, and how do I get through it? But it is a pilgrimage.
Yeah,
and not in that sort of religious sense, but more in the larger pilgrimage of you're on a journey, and there is effort and struggle, and there's good, there's bad, there's detours, there's all of that. And the only way you get through that, those epic things that we say we'd like to do, I'd like to write a book, I'd like to travel here someday, I'd like to run a marathon, I'd like to whatever, it's a pilgrimage. It takes time and effort, education,
Everything worth having is a journey or a pilgrimage, as you put it. And I couldn't agree more. It's the, we call those bucket lists as if it's easy to reach in and grab. I want to finish my doctoral degree. I want to write a book. I want to retire in Maui. I want to run a marathon, like you said. All those things, people just think, oh, I just have to get up and do, but it's a journey. It's a discipline. And we lose that, I think, a lot, especially in the culture that we live in, with everything's quick, everything's easy, everything needs to be instant, kind of a thing. And
absolutely,
we lose that. And it's strange to me. And that's actually partly why I wrote the book is, listen, if we're going to become epic, the subtitle is overcoming mediocrity.
Yeah.
I believe that the major thing that's plaguing society today is mediocrity. It's we're settling for good enough. I mean, nobody wants to be the last or the worst. So we've got that part down, but fewer and fewer people, I find anyway, want to do what it takes to be the best. So they settle with, well, at least I'm not as bad as so-and-so, or at least I'm not the worst. I'm somewhere here in the middle, and they live life that way. And the longer you live life that way, I believe the more bitter and resentful you become in the process.
I would agree with that. I'd also add that there are the things that we all dream of doing. It's been my own experience that although some of these things are challenging, they're not nearly as hard as I imagined they would be. Be it write a book, run a marathon, start a podcast.
Right.
All of that is, and frankly, just like I say, it begins with one step forward.
Right.
You said, here I am. I got two things to do. Go get radiated and be at home.
Right.
So you're like, I want to write a book. And that whole decision to say, well, let me write this book. The whole process, you may go, wow, that's a daunting process. But the fact of the matter is, you can only do it one step at a time. You got to
Right.
start off with that first sentence. And then you find, well, gee, that wasn't too hard. Yes, I can write 1,000 words. Let me repeat that tomorrow. And as I work with people, this whole idea, oh, I've always dreamed of doing, I'm like, today is the day. And, it's my experience, some of these big lifelong, call them bucket list dreams. I don't run anymore, but I did run. I've run 4 marathons and 10 halves and a 50K ultra. And I'm not bragging, but when I finished my first marathon, I was elated. And honestly, probably about 10 minutes later, I was like, well, now what? Right?
Exactly.
I had focused for 6 months to achieve this thing that I said, someday I'd like to run a marathon. And I did it. And it was awesome. But then you're completed. It's kind of like when you were working on your doctorate, you're like, oh my God. And there's all this blood, sweat, and equity that goes into it. But then once your dissertation was accepted, you're kind of like, all right.
Right. It's me and my colleagues talk about it in this way. It's very anticlimactic to accomplish.
It's so disappointing.
When I got tenured, it was the same way. When I finished my dissertation, the same way. When all that kind of thing, exactly right. It's like, okay, we did that. You're so anxious about this process. It gets there, it's done. Then you're like, that's it. I mean, they brought me a piece of cake in the break room and said, congratulations. And then everybody went about their business like normal. It's like, I expected the heavens to open or something, and it doesn't.
I totally get it. I've been fortunate to travel many places, and one of the places I got to travel was South Africa. So I went down to the Cape of Good Hope. Okay.
I've been there.
And okay. So you're probably going to totally relate to the story, Matt. So I'm going down and I get there. Here I am at the end of the African continent. Now, I didn't think I had expectations. However, I guess in my mind, if I were to think about it, I sort of thought that it would be kind of like Monty Python-esque with like a tent with the streamers up on the pole, and maybe James Earl Jones, the end of the African continent. Well, folks, let me tell you, I'm standing on a rocky outcrop. Technically, to my left is the Indian Ocean, and the Atlantic Ocean is on my right. It was anticlimactic, just like Matt said before. You're like, I could be standing on any
I stood in the exact same place. I took my kids there, and as a matter of fact, you can't see, I got a picture of it on my wall. We're standing there, and you're exactly right. This is supposed to be where the two oceans merge. This is Indian. This is it's hilarious.
You're at the end of a continent. I mean,
right. It's like, okay, you could spin me around. I could be standing on a rock at Lake Michigan.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And those moments, not to take away from how epic it was to be there and literally be standing at the end of the African continent. It's totally cool, but it was in some ways, I don't know what I expected.
Right.
But it's somehow I expect to be a lot more grand.
Yeah. And this is why I think people settle for mediocrity, because they have experiences like that and they begin to tell themselves over time, it's not worth it. Or they begin to tell themselves, this is, like you just mentioned, this is too hard. I started this process, it's harder than I thought. So I'm just going to settle here in the middle. And I think we need to shake ourselves in a good way a little bit to encourage ourselves. We need to speak to our own souls and wake ourselves up a little bit. Say, no, wait a second, it is worth it because there's more at stake here than I can actually see. And to your point you made earlier about this whole idea of dreams and different things that we have when we start down, then I wrote in my other book that I mentioned, Contextual Intelligence, using this 3D thinking grid, which 3D thinking is hindsight, insight, and foresight. And it's been a lot of fun for me. But one of the things that I explain is the difference between foresight and fantasy. And I think a lot of us, come to that place where we say to ourselves, hey, I want to finish my graduate degree. I want to write a book. I want to run a marathon, whatever that thing is. I'd like to have a good relationship, and we say, and it's this inner voice. And I always talk to people, on my coaching clients in particular, too. I talk to them about what is your inner voice saying, because I call it the I can't because clause.
Mm-hmm.
And if they say, I'd like to run a marathon, but I can't because, I'd like to be in a healthy relationship, but I can't because, or whatever it is. And it's that I can't because clause that indicates to me that you're living in a fantasy instead of living in foresight. And what we try to do is get people, I believe this is part of the perceptive in being epic. We've got to perceive more accurately what's really in front of us. And a lot of times we move towards these things. And when the first obstacle comes up, it's harder than I thought. It's taking more time than I thought. I'm not getting the feedback that I thought. And we start with I can't because, then we know we started our pilgrimage with a fantasy mindset versus starting off with a foresight-based mindset. I teach it to where the foresight-based mindset is when you encounter that first obstacle, and I promise you it will come.
Oh, absolutely.
Whatever that obstacle is, when it gets there, do you see only the obstacle, or do you see beyond the obstacle? And if you can see beyond the obstacle, then I call that foresight. And you're like, okay, I know this thing is here. Here's how I'm going to pivot or react or respond to adjust to what's in front of me. If you do that, then I believe you're taking that step in foresight.
Absolutely. And I'll sort of pivot on that just a little to say, when I'm working with people, they're talking about whatever their epic dream. I'm like, look, I want to let's plan this out. Let's create the structure that allows you to do it, because structure really does. It is our friend. It helps us. It makes us feel comfortable. We're like, I know what I need to do. I need to do this step, this step, this step. I know when I first started to train for a marathon, I had no idea how I was ever going to do it, but I joined Team in Training. They handed me a training schedule, and I looked at it and goes, go run for 45 minutes. Okay, I can do that. And then I was done for the day. I didn't have to worry about it. I'd follow that schedule. I'd be fine. In school, you take this class, this class, this class. Next thing you know, you've got your doctorate, right?
If you stick at it, and that's kind of the thing.
Right. But I hear people and they'll put the roadblocks in front of themselves. And I joke all the time that my roadblocks are a mirage. Oftentimes they aren't. I'm putting them in front of myself. I'm telling myself why I can't be successful, versus accepting that, yes, there are going to be some roadblocks, some detours. But here's the thing, Matt. You got up this morning, you did not have the answer to every single question you'd get today, and yet you still got up and you're still proceeding with your day. Each of us does that. So if we keep in mind that we don't have all the answers, we are going to make mistakes. Mistakes are part of the journey. Hopefully we learn from them. Hopefully we find, look, sometimes you come up against something and you can't move forward. Perfect example was, I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I had to have 3,000 hours of internship before I could take the exam here in California. I finished that up in February of 2020. I had all kinds of, I'm going to take the licensing exam. I'm going to do all this stuff. And I think we remember what happened about 3 weeks after I finished up my hours. I could barely leave my house. And so what did any of us do when all of a sudden there was a global pandemic, right? You like, okay. there were things I could not do. I couldn't go out and give speeches because no companies were hiring because everyone was at home.
Right.
So
Yeah, same here. I mean, we all had that major obstacle to overcome. Obviously, some did better than others, and those are the things that we have to come to terms with. There's things outside of our control, like what you just mentioned, and there's also those self-inflicted wounds that you were talking about.
absolutely, and oftentimes I want to, you said, a successful relationship or success in my professional career. Look, there are the things that happen that are completely out of your control. There are the things that are in your control. And to quote the Rolling Stones, you don't always get what you want.
You can tell me about that. Oh my goodness. So even with my own story, being diagnosed with prostate cancer for me, I was one of those rare people who had no symptoms whatsoever.
Sure.
You know, completely blindsided. In fact, I was training for a triathlon. Matter of fact, the picture on the back of my book is me just finishing a training 5K. I've got my thumbs up. I've got my Epic Life t-shirt on, kind of thing, and not have any, little did I know that only like 9 weeks later, I'd be diagnosed with this horrible cancer. And I was totally clueless. I was healthy. I was active. I was running. I was training. I'd like to do triathlons. I'm doing all that kind of stuff. And I'm actually a follow-up is training ride, I crashed my bicycle and got a concussion, broke my hand, subluxed a couple ribs here in my chest area and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just doing a follow-up visit with my doctor because I'm having chest pains, not forgetting, by the way, totally forgot that I had this horrible bike accident where I did that. This is several months later. And I'm like, Doc, I'm having these chest pains. Just, well, you better come in. You know how they're super cautious about that stuff. And
well, hopefully, yes, Matt.
Yeah, they should be. They're supposed to be super cautious about that stuff. And so
chest pains are generally not a good sign.
Right. So, but he was, and so he's like, hey, you better come in. We'll do the test and all that. So I did the EKG, and they put the nose thing on. I'm running on the treadmill, doing the whole thing. Everybody's impressed. Well, this guy's in great shape. Why is he even here? Heart's totally fine. Turns out it was just that subluxed rib from the bike accident. And but here's what happened is at that visit, at that time, I'm standing there with my doctor and his nurse, and they're going through my chart. Like, hey, you never came in for your 50-year-old kind of well check, the colonoscopy and the blood pressure, all that kind of stuff that you're supposed to get at 50. I never did that, primarily because I felt great. I was active. I was, because I didn't need to. And so he convinced me to do it there that day. And I only did because I was already there. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have. And they called me 2 weeks later, not even 2 weeks later. It was like 2 or 3 days later after the blood work came back. And they're like, hey, your PSA score is off the chart. You need to see a urologist right away. And so we did. And all of a sudden, I went from being great to the next day having cancer. And then a couple weeks after that, bad cancer.
Yeah.
And what do you talk about recalibrating and I went through all the stuff. Actually, I didn't mention this, but during that same process, I actually wrote another book called Diagnosed, and its subtitle is "It's Not Your Battle to Fight Alone." That's more of my memoir about the whole how I dealt with the emotions, the disappointment, because here, I live by a certain code of ethics and I have a very faith-based orientation, and here I felt like God let me down. It's like I've done everything right as I know to do it, as right as I know to do it, and how come I'm being cursed with this thing now? Here I'm supposed, that's a major shifting in your mind,
Very much so. And so often, there stuff happens to us. I was laughing. I road cycle also. I haven't crashed as bad, but I did crash 3 years ago on my mountain bike, shattered my shoulder, broke my humerus.
That's a bad wreck.
It was real. I broke the head of my humerus into 9 pieces.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was like Humpty Dumpty. And when I crashed, luckily I was riding with someone. I don't know what I would have done had I been on, because I was
alone. I laid there on the road just thinking I was paralyzed and dead.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
And my friend's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I think I dislocated my shoulder, really hurts." And he's like, "All right." So, and it turned out I'd also like I had a hairline fracture in my pelvis, and I walked a mile and a half out on that. And but that was really the minor thing. It was more the shoulder.
Right.
And technically, I did dislocate my shoulder, just not the way I thought. Dislocated it because there was no ball for it
You
to
break it
go
into
into the
9
gap.
places. It's not there, right? Exactly.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I had that whole, not the same way as obviously having cancer, but that whole, I'm living this healthy lifestyle. I'm not going to obviously be able to exercise
Right.
for some long period of time here, but I knew I was going to get back on the bike. I was like, that was I'm like, I am getting back on the bike. I'm not going to let that scare me. And I've been on my mountain bike, but I haven't taken it like on the same trail I was on. I'm choosing not to do that. But
But you're doing something. I mean, and this is what I think is so unique. And I know I'm not here to, you know, self-aggrandize either one of us, but so many people won't do that. I mean, and this is what, I hope your listeners understand and get is when these things come along, you've got to understand it's, yeah, they're hard. Yeah, they're unexpected. Yes, they definitely are a setback, but it's also part of life. And I'm definitely not the, shake it off and don't worry about it. I mean, there are some significant and meaningful things that we need to spend time, talking through. My brother is a professional counselor, and so we work together. I've got a tremendously, incredibly close community around me, friends. My wife has been fantastic, all this kind of thing. So you need that help, you need that support. And if you don't have it, it does make the journey more difficult for sure.
absolutely.
And I know for me, it was a major part of my mental recovery. And I can also tell you, I'm still not there yet. I mean, it's because I still have 9 more months of treatment and therapy on different things, and so it's a funny thing is after like my 4th or 5th visit with my oncologist, I noticed I got an email from some total stranger who wanted to talk to me about prostate cancer and how I'm all that. Come to find out, my physician, he goes, "I hope you don't mind, but I've been giving your email out to my patients to talk to you because you're just I've never seen anybody handle this how you and your wife are handling this, and whatever your secret is, you please have to share it." And we started, actually, my wife and I, after the initial diagnosis, we found out it was worse. We started looking for help ourselves, and there's really not any because men don't like to talk about prostate cancer because it's not the cancer, it's the side effects and what happens
Absolutely.
from the cancer,
Yeah.
incontinence and sexual dysfunction. Those are, and for men, that's shame. Those are 2 areas of incredible shame. So they don't like to talk about that. So that's why there's not a lot out there. But there's breast cancer stuff everywhere. The prevalence of prostate cancer is the same as the prevalence of breast cancer, but we just never talk about it because, well, men don't talk about it.
Right.
To keep it a
Absolutely.
secret. I'm not telling people I'm incontinent or have
Yeah.
sexual dysfunction or whatever that is. And so we started a foundation called the Battle for the Bulge. And it's tongue in cheek. We really like it. It's got a lot of things. So we have the battleforthebulge.com, and it's a fundraiser and awareness campaign that we do for prostate cancer education and awareness. We tie it to a 5K every year. So we do a walk and a 5K, raise awareness, and that's where I distribute the book Diagnosed I was telling you about and all
Yeah.
that. But you can't my point in saying all this is simply if we leave it to however it plays out and don't try to take advantage of the adversity. And this is where I believe Epic takes you, whether it's that pilgrimage you're talking about, whether it's the 4 maxims that I talk about. I don't think it matters. Living an epic life is about taking the things that come your way, expected, unexpected, good, bad, and using them all as learning opportunities to do something that you wouldn't have done before.
Absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to do with our stuff. So
Couldn't say it better. Matt, I want to, obviously, an epic conversation on so many levels. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. How can people, if they're interested in finding your book, getting a hold of you, working with you, how can they get a hold of you?
So 2 places. I already mentioned battleforthebulge.com.
Yep.
You can go right there. My contact information, all my stuff is there. You can also go to matthewkutz.com. And
Okay.
that's my website. And I have my books are there. My research is there. Email, contact, all that stuff is there. So battleforthebulge.com and or matthewkutz.com. And Kutz is spelled Kutz.
All right. Thank you so much. I want to remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book Epic Begins with One Step Forward at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.